All right, so today I find myself driving a pretty sweet example of a 991.2 Porsche 911 Carrera GTS. It's a mouthful, right? And it's 2021 now, so we're about a good solid year or so removed from being able to purchase a 991.2 in any form from a dealer brand new. The thing is, there's several in-house alternatives to this car, meaning other Porsches around the same money that you could get instead. The main ones, or the primary ones that I'm going to be comparing this car to throughout this review, are the two that I've driven on this channel, which one is a 991.2 base Carrera and the other is a 992 Carrera S. Now I'll link those both down in the description box below, but I'll be referring to them probably a bit more than any other car as when comparing them or comparing this car to other Porsches. Now, as some of you may know, but others of you may be asking, what does GTS stand for? Well, in Porsche terms, it stands for Gran Turismo Sport. Now, this kind of means that within the Carrera lineup, this is the big daddy. This is the best 911 street car you're gonna get. The best daily driver 911 that money can buy, although we all do know that with the right amount of money and with the right amount of patience, you can of course daily drive a Turbo or Turbo S. Obviously there is the motorsport division that makes all the GT cars. Those are obviously still road legal vehicles, but these are meant to be street cars in a way that those are kind of meant to be track weapons that you can still drive on the road, as obviously most people do, but just to differentiate that right there for you guys. This 2018 911 Carrera GTS packs a 3-liter twin turbocharged flat 6-cylinder producing 450 horsepower and 405 pound-feet of torque. The power is sent through a 7-speed PDK transmission, while a 7-speed manual was available. This PDK is fantastic, but I can only imagine how delightful it must be to drive this car with a 7-speed manual. All the GTS vehicles receive the Sport Design body kit as standard, although this particular car has what I believe is an Aero Kit package ducktail style lip. It also gives you a Sport Chrono pack, which is again standard on the GTS, and that also has this Sport mode drive selector here, so you can switch from normal to Sport Plus, and to individual. And no GTS would be complete without a standard sports exhaust. Now that's a cost option on the base and the S vehicles, S trim Carreras. Maybe I'm crazy, or maybe it's the PPF, the petrol particulate filters they have in Europe now, but this sounds better to me than that 992 Carrera S did personally. And these are actually some of my favorite wheels you can get on a 911. Unlike that 992, they are not staggered as in 19-inch up, 20-inch up front, 21-inch in the back, I believe it was on that car. They're both 20 inches, but they're 245 rubber up front and 305 section rubber in the rear. Plenty of grip, and they look fantastic to boot. They have that center lock, so it can be a bit difficult to get the wheel off, but it's a really cool look. It's not that difficult, it's just inconvenient, but it looks very cool, and the writing even on the center lock is a very nice little motorsport touch. Now you get the exact same brakes as this generation Carrera S received, but optional on the GTS is the PCCB, which is the Porsche ceramic composite brakes. I would actually advise to not go ahead and get that or find a car with that, because these brakes are more than adequate for a car that weighs around 3,300 pounds, and those brakes are just going to cost you more money and probably squeak a bit more than these do already. So I would just stick with the standard brake system. So this GTS started its life at just over $120,000, but was around $150,000 as equipped. Nowadays, they're all over the map, but I've seen them sell anywhere from around 90-ish all the way up to 125. There's certainly been some outliers, but usually it just depends on the mileage and the spec. But despite having an electric power steering rack and despite having a forced induction motor, the good news is that Porsche still knows how to cook its chicken and bake its cake. And I just came up with that, but back to the driving. Just like any 911 that I've ever driven, there's a sense of occasion that comes with driving this car. It commands your attention and it feels like something special. Now I know that it's not some sort of crazy supercar that costs $250,000, $500,000, but it is a sports car. It's a true and classic sports car. In fact, it's the car many people think of when they hear the words sports car. I currently have the car, actually I have it in sport mode. I'm gonna put it over into Sport Plus mode. Everything is cranked up to 10 right now. And man, this thing just hooks up and inspires a tremendous amount of confidence. You know, obviously we're on public roads, so we're not doing anything too crazy, but you can take corners at such, I mean, not high speeds, but you can carry speed through a corner, and this car makes you look like a great driver. You can drive very smoothly and very competently. Hate to say this, I'm not trying to diss myself, but it's the car. It's really the car, and this is a classic case of it's the car. No Tesla self-driving. This just allows you to be a better driver. It gives you the tools you need. Something to note is that on this 991.2, I'm currently manually shifting, which is something I'm able to do on both the steering wheel using the paddle shifters as well as with the actual gear lever itself. Gear lever, which is something you can only do now on the 992 GT3s and has been eliminated as an option on the regular 992s, meaning you have the little bronze shifter here. It is nice to have this as an option along with the paddle shifters. I don't like losing options. I think it's nice to have options. And the fact that Porsche got rid of this, obviously knowing that people enjoy it enough to put it back into the GT3, just makes me wonder why they would ever get rid of it in the first place. You know what? I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to drive hard right here because this is a beautiful little snaky part of the... Oh my goodness. Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. This thing...
I've never even said, oh my Lord, before in my life. Like,
this thing brings out a different version of you. This car is truly something spectacular. Oh, we got some wood in the road. Go around that. All right. Upon hard acceleration off the line, it hooks up pretty nice. You can definitely get the back end to break loose a little bit, but it seems to replicate more of that McLaren feeling of, I can't believe this is rear-wheel drive, versus kind of that muscle car feeling of you put your foot down and just, you know, leave rubber. And this can line up. And I think it has to do with the fact that you get both a lot of weight in the rear, so it holds those rear wheels down nice, and you have nice and thick rubber to help you put all that power down. So the seating position is nice and low. The visibility is as great as any 911 you'd imagine. Nice large windows and quite different than your typical supercar visibility. The beauty of the 911 line is even when you go all the way up to a GT2 RS, you still get better visibility than you would in, say, an Aventador or Huracan or any other car in that segment. I also really like this steering wheel, which is the sport design wheel that has or lacks any buttons, which is fantastic. And it's a slightly smaller diameter as well, chunky enough, and I have no complaints. This is like one of the best steering wheels I've come in contact with. And the thing that I really want to point out isn't the steering wheel, it's the steering itself, which is brilliant for an EPS system. That's an electric power steering rack. I don't know how Porsche does electric power steering this good or this well when you have brands, other good brands like BMW, a brand that I think is fantastic, that just doesn't know how to cook in the feel and kind of like sense of where your front tires are at all within their EPS systems. Now, their newer systems are getting better. Their newer racks are a little better, like the one you find in the G20 330i, but it still doesn't hold water to this. And I know this is Porsche, but this becomes, or the steering system becomes kind of one of the strongest suits of this car in this relative price range as compared to most other cars that are this new in this relative price range. And lastly, this PDK, it's as good as you've heard. I mean, it's the best dual clutch system transmission you're gonna get. I think at least sub $200,000, this is it. Manual would be awesome, and I would love to drive. I've never driven a 911 in manual, to be fair, but this setup doesn't leave much to be desired. If I had to pick a few gripes with this car, I don't like that the front intakes collect so much rocks and dirt and stuff that you can so easily see when you look at the front of the car. And I also don't like how the car makes a thumping noise and feeling through the wheel when you're making very slow maneuvers, turning, pulling out of parking spots, making U-turns. It's something that every 991.2, it's something that every 991.1, .2, and 992 that I've ever driven has. I know it's like a Porsche thing, you just learn to accept it, at least within these 911s. But if you have one, you know what I'm talking about most likely. And if you haven't experienced it, you have no idea what I'm talking about, Go drive one in a parking lot slow and you'll see exactly what I mean. The second you start turning, it thumps and bumps. Very weird. And the infotainment is certainly a bit dated now, although this car is only a few years old. This one in particular, being a 2018 model year, still, especially when you compare it to the 992 system that's both larger and a bit more intuitive, I also couldn't care less, because this car for me is not about messing around on here. It's about driving, and anything I need to do, I can still do. It has Apple CarPlay. It definitely has Bluetooth audio. I can play my music, has navigation. I don't really care besides that. Now, it's important to remember that this is actually the most powerful stock Carrera you can buy to date. Now, you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, technically speaking, the Carreras are the standard cars. So a Turbo or Turbo S is not a Carrera, it's a 911, a GT3, RS, 2RS, all those cars, Tourings and Speedsters, those are all 911s, but they're not Carreras. So of the Carrera lineup, this is the big daddy. This has 450 horsepower, which just barely edges out. Look at this, 4x4 squared, which just barely edges out that 992 C2S I drove, which I think makes 444, so 6 horsepower less than this. But we'll get into the comparisons between this and that 992 C2S in a moment. It's just nice to sit in a car that you know is kind of like the ultimate Carrera, or I should say the ultimate 911 daily driver. I know I mentioned before, you can of course daily drive anything you want, including turbos and Turbo S's, and some people do, but this is that slightly more low-key, slightly more affordable, and more normal Porsche model that you can more comfortably, more easily daily drive. Obviously, when the forthcoming 992 GTS comes out, whenever that is, it will surely have more power than this. I'm guessing probably around 465, 470, but that's going to come at the cost of probably $130,000-ish starting price, and most of those cars as equipped will easily be into the mid and upper $100,000 range. So this is still a pretty decent value when you consider that you can get these around the mid-high 90s up to about $110,000, $115,000. But that really does leave this car's primary competition as the 992 Carrera S, which we're gonna talk about right after a very, very brief tall boy test. I would ask you guys to comment down below and guess, but it's not even worth it. Here you go, here's the tall boy test. All right, so powertrain-wise, this car is very similar to the 992 Carrera S. Matter of fact, I think their engines are almost the exact same, if not the exact same, because that car has taken the turbos from this car. The exact same turbo units from this car are on the new 992 Carrera S. The only main differences being some upgraded fuel injectors as well as a larger intercooler. But suffice to say, the cars are very similar, the power outputs are very similar. The transmissions are, again, I think identical, the same exact 7-speed PDK. So the real differences become the chassis, which really is the body being a bit smaller, the proportions of this car, the styling of this car being a little bit more traditional 911, whereas the 992 is a bit more avant-garde with some more sharp angles and edges, and has kind of become like a homologation of all 911s into one car. And while all 992s now get the wide body standard, so does this rear-wheel drive GTS. It's the only rear-wheel drive Carrera to get the wide body in the 991 or 991.2 generation. So the interior is of course nicer in the 992, not a ton nicer, but a smidget nicer, the tech, and I mean, they both have a lot of leather and stuff. I think the door cards seem a little nicer in the 992. The car also has the engine, or the engine's also been moved forward a bit in the 992s, so you get a bit less of that extreme or intense oversteer, which I actually like. So it's actually a point in my book, or in my eyes, in the favor of 991.2. I like that the car is almost a bit fidgety, but it just, like, the front end is so light, and I mean, the majority of the weight is so far back, hanging even past the rear axle, and I love that. Look, logic tells me that you should buy neither of these cars, and that's because the real secret sauce is buying a more enthusiast spec Carrera T, or shelling out a little bit more dough and finding yourself in the now omnipresent, at least at Cars and GT3 models. But these cars aren't really all about logic. They're kind of a bit more about pulling at your heartstrings. And who am I kidding? I couldn't get Porsche to take my money faster for one of these. The point is that this car is really all about being visceral and not always about making complete sense. I don't think any car in this price segment and with this car's main purpose, which is driving pleasure, is all about making complete sense financially, logically. And that's why Porsche makes so many different variations of the 911. If you've ever taken a look, you'll see there's an incredibly ridiculous amount or a different variation of 911s available at all times. And I guess their attitude is, we're making them and people are buying them, and we're gonna keep making them and people are gonna keep buying them. I guess that's true. So the GTS definitely makes less sense in my mind, I guess, compared to some of the used options available. I think to myself, all right, for around $100-ish thousand, I know the market's gone up, but I would like to get a 997 GT3. You know, a far more analog and visceral driving experience, albeit slower than this. Remember, this has more torque than its same generation GT3, meaning a 991.2 GT3 has less torque than this. So a 997 GT3 is certainly going to have less, I think, less power and less torque, right? Around the same power, but definitely less torque. But that's not all that matters. That car has a fantastic motor. I believe that's the Metzger motor still, and that is just a unique and special vehicle that I would probably rather get than this. And I think, oh, well, if I want a new car, I could probably save 20 grand, even more than 20 grand, maybe get a Carrera T, and it'll have a similar exhaust system, it'll have a similar suspension setup, and I can actually wring that out a bit more because it's a little bit slower. You can even tune one of those and make it as fast as this. So there is certainly a world out there that exists, but for those people who want what the GTS has to offer, which is an out-of-the-box setup that's the best that Porsche offers in a Carrera, the ultimate Porsche 911 Carrera daily driver. And to be fair, driving a Porsche is like drinking some liquor. A $10 bottle of whiskey can get you drunk, but I'm guessing you want to drink the good stuff. And with this, it's just like that. Pick your poison and enjoy. If you guys enjoyed the video, definitely consider subscribing. More videos will be coming out every single week. As always, this is Rio. Peace. Actually, one little... Jesus Christ, this thing is a beast. Holy... All right, well...